Welcome to The Romantic Side of Suspense with Sarah Hemmerker. In each episode, she'll talk with your favorite romantic suspense authors. They will take you behind the scenes of the writing process, giving excerpts from their writing, and share stories about their writing life.
Texas Cold Case Threat by Jessica R. Patch. When a cold case turns hot, an isolated ranch goes from refuge to crime scene. After a murderer sends her taunting letters, FBI behavioral analyst Chelsea Banks retreats to a friend's ranch and interrupts the housekeeper being attacked. When evidence connects the break-in to a cold case serial killer, Chelsea's best friend, Texas Ranger Tack Holliday, needs her help. With Tack at her side, this could be Chelsea's chance to catch two killers, unless one of them gets her first.
Hi, and welcome to this episode of The Romantic Side of Suspense. I'm your host, Sarah Hamricker, and I'm so glad you joined me. Today I'm talking with Lisa Harris and Jessica Patch. So, obviously this is set in Texas. I guess big surprise there. Now, are you from Texas?
Oh, no. I'm actually, I spent the first 18 years of my life in Southern Illinois, and then my husband's from the South, the Memphis area. So I've been here since I was just a baby at 19. So almost 27 years.
Oh, wow. All right. But you like to set your books in Texas?
This is the first book I'm
okay.
actually setting in Texas. Typically, I keep the book set in Memphis or somewhere in Tennessee, Mississippi, often a fictional town that's based off somewhere real. And I decided to change scenery and states. This is the first one, but all three will be set in Texas.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit about the book. So, I mean, obviously there's a cold case and something's happening there. There's a threat. You can get it from the title.
Yes, I love cold cases. You can't write a love-inspired suspense without a threat involved. But this is the first book in a Quantico Profilers thriller series.
Oh.
And they're marketing it as a Quantico Profilers thriller. Exciting. And this is going to follow a team of behavioral analysts out of Quantico, or profilers. And my heroine is the profiler, and she has really messed up a profile. She's found out that her profile led to the wrong killer. Oh. And she puts stock in everything according to the fact that she can profile. So she's having a rough go of it. So she's come to Texas to stay on a ranch and kind of figure out if her career is over or what she's going to do. And it intersects her with a serial killer. And her good friend, who's a Texas Ranger, who helped her stay on the ranch, is actually working in the cold case division. And this particular crime intersects with some of the cold cases that he's working. So she's actually working to catch two killers in this book, or they're going to catch her.
Busy lady. Busy lady.
Busy. She's busy.
So tell me about the catch. I mean, I'm because it's romantic suspense, I'm guessing you're not talking about baseball or football.
No, there is no sports involved.
What are they catching?
Yeah. Well, they're catching criminals, of course, because this is romantic suspense. Yeah. This is actually book 3 in my U.S. Marshal series. So it centers, and the whole series centers around two main characters, Madison and Jonas, who are actually, U.S. Marshals. And so fugitives and catching fugitives and some of those things that a U.S. Marshal would do is, So, and this is the a wrap up to the series, as well as kind of a wrap up to the overarching thread that has to do with Madison and her husband who was killed, and new love with Jonas.
Oh, nice. Yeah. You get them all in there. So now I've written a couple of books about U.S. Marshals. That's a fun one to do because there's not much information out there.
I know. And I didn't know very much. And that's why I thought I want to do something different. And what is out there is very interesting. I mean, obviously we know fugitives, but there's a lot of other things that they do. And I did find it very fascinating. I listened to a book by a former U.S. Marshal, and it was just all interesting how they they almost kind of are outside the box a little bit, do things interesting the way they kind of catch people and trap people. And I found it fun and different. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And just that they don't like to talk about it too much. So for fiction writers, I'm like, well, I can't find this information. So I'm just,
so we'll just make it work. Yeah.
Make it work. And, so that's always kind of fun. So where are your books set? What kind of location do you enjoy setting for your books?
Well, this series is actually set up in the Pacific Northwest, primarily Washington State, where I was born and raised. And so it was kind of fun to go back there. This particular book is more in the Olympic Park and in Seattle and on Ruby Beach, which is along the beautiful Washington State coastline. The other books kind of went up into the island, San Juan Islands, and which is some place I'd been a couple years ago. And I was like, okay, I've really got to set something up here because it's so beautiful, with all the forest and kind of eerie fog. And, it's just a great place where fugitives can get lost. And you can just have a lot of options. And the terrain up there is so beautiful. You've got rainforest and beaches and cities and I like to see settings are kind of like a whole nother character. And this was just a fun place to put the book.
Yeah. So, obviously you based it on where you lived, where you went. So how else do you figure about location? What about location do you think is important for authors to kind of think about when writing a book?
It depends on what your book is. I know a lot of readers love small towns. So, small towns are always good. You probably find this too. In a big city, it's harder to write suspense because just go to the police station, it seems like so easy. Just so to make it more remote, especially for romantic suspense, it's almost a must. I mean, you have to have no communication. You have to have, someplace where the answer isn't. And I did read this book one time and I just thought so many times, just go to the police. And then I know the book would be over, but it was like ridiculous. Yeah. And so these kinds of settings to me, when you've got forests and you're in the middle of nowhere and communication really can be glitchy, it's that to me, especially for a romantic suspense, that's kind of what we need to tend to do. And I think what most romantic suspense authors do, Alaska, I mean, that's, you can be in the middle of nowhere and you can be running and there's really no one to help you. So those kinds of settings are really essential. In the middle of a big city, I find it a lot more difficult. You got to have a really good reason. And obviously there's probably reasons why people wouldn't just go to the police, but you got to have good motivation for that.
Right. One of my books is coming out in this summer is set in rural Shenandoah Valley, rural Virginia. And I actually have an old-fashioned phone book, a phone booth that plays in it, just because it's in one of those kind of dead zones. When you get out in the road, there's not, you think, because most of us live in bigger cities, not most of us, but I know a lot of us, I live right outside of Washington, D.C. It's hard for me to fathom sometimes that there are pockets of fairly populated areas that you can lose cell phone coverage pretty easily.
Exactly.
And, so I had some orchard owners install a phone booth because their workers needed a working phone if there was an emergency because cell phone service wasn't
right.
thing. So those, and then so you kind of, I kind of explained that a little bit in there so people weren't like, well, that's really stupid. If you grew up in a big city, you're thinking, nobody has a phone. But
it doesn't happen anymore, but it does. Yeah.
But it does. And I've actually been in rural Virginia and passed by and seen like phone booths with like a phone. And I'm like, that's still a thing sometimes.
Yeah. And it just works for romantic suspense. Yeah.
Yes. Sure. Yes, it does. Although the phone book did get all shot up. So, had to have some excitement in there. But so Jessica, how did you come up with this series?
Well, I love Criminal Minds. I like shows that really kind of go into the psyche of a serial killer, what makes them a serial killer, and then how are we going to catch them. And I knew I wanted to do a series based on that. So that's what began it all. And then I just kind of started brainstorming, okay, who is she? And then how do I want to kill people? And who do I want to kill in Texas? So I did a lot of research of Texas and the settings And sometimes that kind of helps me decide, okay, we're looking at this part of Texas. So what could happen here? Well, we're close to the border. So I thought, well, what could we do? What's this killer doing? Who is he killing? And then it just kind of snowballed from there.
Yeah. And so do you have the other, you said it's a 3-book series?
It is.
So do you have the other 2 books? You decide what's happening in those books?
Yeah, the second book is about the second profiler in this particular series. So you'll get a peek at both profilers, Duke Jericho and Vera Gilmore. And the second book is Duke's story. So you'll meet them very briefly in the first book. And so then I had to decide, okay, who is he? And how do I want to write his story? And what hooks do I want to use? Because Love Inspire likes lots of tropes and hooks. So I kind of write out what hooks appeal to me, and then I kind of develop the story around that. So we have an age gap romance. He's about 12 to 14 years older than my heroine, and she is a forensic artist in the second story, and he's coming to profile a Sunrise serial killer and redo that profile that's about a decade old, and he's going to meet up with her in this particular story. And then the third story is Vera Gilmore, and it's a reunion romance story. I love reunion romances. They're kind of my favorite of all the romances. I like reunions.
And can you define that for our listeners who may not be familiar with that term? Reunion romance. I mean, it kind of makes sense.
Romance is where 2 people once dated, maybe were engaged, childhood sweethearts, and something has caused them to break up. It could be a myriad of things. It could be an ugly breakup. In this particular story, it's just they took different paths. They're very fond memories of one another. I've done the You Broke My Heart before, and so I thought I would like to do something fresh, because not every breakup is a you broke my heart. It's just circumstances changed. I have really fond memories, but I haven't seen them in 15 or 20 years. And he has an arsonist and needs some help. He's a detective in a small fictional West Texas town, and she's going to come and help him. But it's a pretty big deal for her, because she's been burned literally by fire. So she's coming to kind of face her biggest fears, and so we'll get them back together, which is not a spoiler alert, because you always get them together at the end in a romance. It's how they're going to get together.
Yes. Yeah. Right. I know it's not, I mean, that's one of the things I enjoy writing at Romantic Suspense, is that, yes, they are going to be together. There's no, you may think they're not, but it's just the journey of how they get together, how they're going to, overcome their antipathy for each other if they don't like each other, or, what's going to happen. How are they going to, reconnect after, for your reunion idea. And I just love that they do get together. I mean, we need happy endings. Happy endings are good. There's a lot of happy endings in life. It doesn't always have to be.
We need the happy and we need the hope. We need that there's hope for something better. And that's what I love about these stories. There's always hope for them, and a happily ever after. So.
Yeah, definitely. Even with the, danger and suspense that we have to write, right? I love that we can, and as Christian writers, we infuse some of that with our faith, right? I mean, that's what gives us the ultimate hope, and having the characters grow in their faith, or come to grips with faith, or refresh their faith in a way, I think is always exciting, because that's how life is. Our faith is not this linear, here we are, it's the ups and the downs. We have the good days when we're like, everything's fine, and the bad days where we're like, where is God? So I love that we can, write that in our characters and have them have that authenticity for faith as well.
Right. That's good.
Yeah. Yeah. Good stuff. So, so what was your most surprising thing that you learned about Texas in your research?
Oh, that is a good question. I don't know if anything was surprising, but I know it was very exciting and enthralling. I enjoyed researching the Davis Mountains, the Rio Grande. I stretched a lot for fiction, because that's what we do, but also there are some real things there. And I think probably my favorite part was researching their canoe trip and using real life, like actual trip, and using some of that verbiage was fun. I think it's going to bring some realism. And then of course I did have to stretch stuff. The town is actually fictional, but I based it off of a mixture of a few places actually. Like, oh, I like that, and I like that from that town. So we're just gonna have one big town with all this fun stuff in it. So I hope readers from Texas will enjoy seeing some real things, and then also show me a little bit of grace with, I don't think that's in the same location. I stretched it.
They should, we should, and we have to, because we have to have certain things happen for our story. Right. I mean, if we need a house on this side of the street where there's no houses, we need to put the house there. If we're writing about a real place, or if we're writing about, I like to use real places, and I also like to I have created a fictional town in the Shenandoah Valley, just kind of, there's nothing there. I just put a town there. In that particular area. Yeah. There we go. Yeah, I know. So that's been fun, but I try to make it realistic around it. And then I have some books set in the Northern Virginia area, which is where I live. And that's been fun too. But some of them are like, yeah, okay, that I need that not to be quite like that. So, I think readers understand it, as long as we're not, as long as you're not having, a horrendous blizzard along the Rio Grande.
There is no blizzard in the Rio Grande.
Right. I mean, we all know Texas can get cold, and they had that cold snap last year and everything, but I'm saying that there's some things that you have to go, okay.
Right.
That's just, some readers may not notice, I probably wouldn't notice, but other readers who are from there, you just don't want to alienate them by being unrealistic. We can stretch it, like you said. We can stretch it so they'll go, okay, she changed that, but within the realm of the story, it's still real.
Yes. I made sure to look up the weather and keep that. I mean, the third book is set in winter, but winter in Texas, there's no snow. That would be rare, but there's not going to be really any snow there or anything. So that was fun to look up little details like that, looking at the plant life, what's on the terrain. When I talk about a tree, I'd have to look up, well, is that actually a tree there? And what kind of birds are around the Rio Grande? And doing as much as possible to make it as real as possible while still keeping some fictional elements there.
Yeah. And I had one of my Christmas novella is set in my little fictional town, which is basically in Central Virginia. And we tend to have very mild winters, and especially December. There's been Decembers where, it's been 70 degrees in Virginia. And so I had this one plant there that was still green. And I had one of my beta readers years ago commented on it, and I was like, okay, I should probably mention that this is not unusual. So I kind of worked it a little bit into the story by an outsider. He was like, how could those still be, around, because I'm like, anyone who lives in Virginia or South Carolina, North Carolina, they're going to go, yeah, that's perfectly normal in December to still have a green plant. But someone in Maine or Minnesota is going to go, ain't that thing dead because of the cold? So it's important, like you said, it's important to do that research or to make sure that if you're stretching it a little bit, or if it seems unusual, to offer a quick little explanation, because that plant was important to the story. So I needed to make people to believe me that it was alive. Yeah, I think location is always an interesting thing. So do you make up like cities or towns? Have you done that in your writing before? Like a
lot of times I do. Yeah, just because you can't really get into trouble if you make up a town, because nobody can come to me and say that was wrong. So I've done both. Like a lot of this was set in Seattle, and it's wonderful because of the Google Maps and all of this, whether they were in Seattle or whether they were in along the coastline where there really probably wasn't always good communication. I can use that. You can actually just go, Google right in and see exactly where you want to be. But then I've also done a lot of just made up towns and stuff in areas that people would be familiar with. But I kind of like doing something where I make it up just because, again, nobody can really catch me, and people will catch you if you do something that, that's not right. I live there. I know. And if it's a place where you haven't actually visited, you can get yourself into trouble. So
yes. Yeah, no, I totally understand about that. And I've said a couple of books, and I live in Northern Virginia in the area. And I had a friend who read one of them. She was, oh, it was fun to see some familiar things. I'm like, yeah, I hope you didn't read it too close, because I know I fudged a little bit because I needed to for specific, but Google Maps, isn't that like the most wonderful gift to writers ever?
It really is. You don't have to go anywhere. I mean, it's better probably if you have been there, but I remember writing a series set like back in Boston or something, and somebody was like, oh, wow, we can just tell that you've been there. And I was like, nope. But you can literally find out about anything. And I'm sure that some of the things I Google probably has the authorities going, what is she doing? But
yeah,
it's all just for the writing, I promise.
Yeah, no, that's funny. Facebook recently decided that I was in the market for a wedding dress and a full abaya. The both of them. I was like, I'm not sure what I was looking for to get those two.
Yeah, but somehow they thought you were,
not Muslim, but okay. And then I feel pretty good that they have no idea what I really want. And so writers, we have a lot of fun messing up all those algorithms because I'm searching for car models. I'm like, I am never going to buy this car. So come on, give me all the ads, because I am not your customer. I need to know.
So much easier though than having to go to the library or having to order books. I do have a stack of books from 20 years ago, all about crime and the crime scenes, just all this kinds of stuff. And now it's like, I can just go online and actually get information from a real person who, can answer those questions for me. It's crazy. Yeah, it is crazy. And it is nice. I mean, there are, we all have a lot of books. You can see some of my books behind me on the video here, but we all, love the books, but for the location, it, because the Google Maps has just been, and Google Earth, you can kind of go down, drill down and see, okay, how close was this road to the water in this story? It's fun. And that's, You've been listening to The Romantic Side of Suspense. I'm your host, Sarah Hammerker, and I'm so glad you joined me. You can find out more about Lisa and Jessica and their new books in the notes for this podcast.
The Catch by Lisa Harris. After a harrowing attempt on a judge's life at the courthouse, Deputy U.S. Marshals Madison James and Jonas Quinn are tasked with finding a missing woman and an endangered child in connection to the murder of the judge's wife. What seems like a fairly straightforward case becomes hopelessly tangled when the marshals discover that the woman they're searching for is not who they think she is. Madison and Jonas are forced into a race to find the woman and the child before the men who want her dead discover her location. And in a final showdown that could cost her everything, Madison will come face to face with the person who murdered her husband.
Thanks for listening to The Romantic Side of Suspense with Sarah Hammerker. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review. You can sign up to receive notifications of upcoming podcasts and listen to previous editions at sarahhammerkerfiction.com.